right. Our guest today is a writer who has worked on movies like R.L. Stein's Zombie Town and Gnome Alone. He's making his first foray into the world of comic books these days with Armored, the first issue of which arrives in comic shops on April 24th and will continue as a bi-monthly series with the second issue coming out June 26th. Michael Schwartz is here. Mr. Schwartz, how are you?
Hi, Rob. Very nice to meet you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So, am I right that this whole journey with Armored started with your comic book collection being stolen? Is that what happened?
Yes, in a weird way. Definitely there's connective tissue there, let's say. So
Okay.
I think the idea came about when I was revisiting like old cartoons of the 80s, and just kind of reminiscing about, trips I used to take to Europe all the time when the idea kind of came into my head. Like I was on
Yeah.
parental leave. I live in Canada, so we have parental leave up here.
No, there you go.
And yeah.
If only.
And so the idea kind of came to me just about a kid finding armor and the a ghost of the original wearer being attached to it or being kind of like a sidekick to the kid. That was just the idea that came to me.
Hmm.
But then we had moved into a new house a few years prior, and I realized, oh, I can finally bring all my comics because I had them in storage at my mom's house.
Of course.
And I was living, in condos in Toronto, and so I was like, wow, I actually get to bring like 20 boxes of comics into this house, and I have like a room right next to my office here where I store all of them, but I needed to clean it out first, so I brought in all the boxes and put them right into my garage. But that
Okay.
night, I put them into my garage. Someone broke into my garage and lugged them all out, all the boxes. And it wasn't just comics they stole. They stole
Yeah.
movie posters, even clothes,
Oh my
winter
gosh.
gear. It was bizarre stuff they took. They even took my wife's American Girl dolls from when she
Oh
was a
geez.
child. Yeah, it was pretty devastating.
The thief was a collector in a sense.
Possibly,
Mhm.
or just the seller.
Could
Yeah.
be. And when
So,
did this happen?
so this happened in 2018. So we
2018. Okay.
we had just had our second child,
Okay.
and we were sleep deprived. We
Hmm.
didn't hear the door. My wife was like, I thought I heard a weird noise that sounded like our garage door opening, but I think it was just a truck. And then I heard the noise at 4 a.m. and was like, that does sound like the garage. And I ran out. I opened the garage. It was probably 5 minutes after they had closed it, and everything was gone. It was like
Oh my
empty. The
gosh.
garage was half empty. And I called the police, and yeah,
Yeah.
it was out of there. But how Armored became a comic is related to that because it was around this time where it was at that time I told my wife, I'm like, I'm done. I'm never collecting a comic again.
Hmm.
I just started a new pull list at the local comic shop near my house.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. It's too heartbreaking to look at comics.
Yeah, I
Then
believe
I
it. I believe
yeah.
it.
Then I started to see comics, the comics that I had stolen like at shops, and I was like, oh, I'd really like that back. And I found
Hmm.
a pawn shop near me that sold comics for 50 cents. And my local comic shop had boxes of comics where they'd sell like, 30 comics for $10. And so I just
Okay.
started collecting stuff I had
So
stolen.
you kind of got everything back.
Yes.
I
And I
mean, you had to
started
buy it, but you got it.
yeah, and my goal was get it back for as cheap as possible
Oh
because
yeah.
people don't go in those dollar bins that often. People like there are a lot of dollar bin hunters, but I wanted to go into them and just get whatever I could back. And
Yeah, definitely.
sure enough, my collection was huge. I was like up to like I don't know, back up to 15 boxes at least, and I was reading so much. And I thought to myself, well, instead of writing another movie, I've written like 13 movies that haven't been made. Why don't I write a comic and just see if I can get it made? I don't know how to do it. So that's kind of how it worked. And
Okay.
the first thing that came into mind was Armored. They had that idea, and I was like, well, I need to explore this idea more and see
Well,
what I can do with it.
real quick, what was in the not to dwell on this, but what was in
Yeah.
the collection that got stolen? I mean, what had you been reading
Okay.
previously? I mean, were you a collector as a kid?
I was. My dad
Okay.
is a big collector, so my dad collects Silver Age books. Like he has Amazing Fantasy 15, X-Men
Oh
1,
geez.
Avengers 1. So he's like a big collector. So
Wow.
anytime he would get a bump in grade on a book, he would give me the lower grade one. So I had like the first
Naturally.
Morbius. I had early Fantastic Four books. So stuff like that. But then I continued to collect myself. So I was a big Spawn collector in the 90s, Hellboy, The Goon, and kind of more horror stuff in the 90s.
Okay.
But then around 2000, I got back into I got into DC. I was never into DC.
Okay.
And I picked up those early Flash issues by Jeff Johns.
Oh,
And if it was
okay.
pick anything, it had Scott Collins's artwork on the cover, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I like that artwork." And I was so into the Flash TV show,
Hmm.
so I was like, I started collecting that, and that got me hooked. And then I
Yeah.
just started picking up all DC books, and from like 2002 to New 52, I
Oh
was
boy.
all DC and a bit of Marvel. So I
Did you
had
drop out at the new 52?
I did, but it was for two reasons. I felt like it was a good point to stop because my
Yeah.
collection was growing, and
Hmm.
we had just bought a condo, and I had
Okay,
no
there you
room,
go.
and so everything went into my mom. So for almost all of New 52, I had dropped out of collecting,
Okay.
and Rebirth brought me back.
There you go. You know what? Well, I'll leave the editorial comments to the side about the new
Okay.
52 for now.
Hey,
Okay.
wait. Before you go on, I went back to New 52, and I've found a lot that I've loved. So like
Okay.
that was the great thing about recollecting is revisiting stories I had read as a kid, but also stuff I had missed.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so getting back to Armored, so had you had this sort of seed for the idea in
Yeah.
your head previously? I mean, where did the idea about a suit of armor come from?
I don't know. You know, there's this old 80s show called Visionaries, and I love the imagery of it. It's like they have these holograms on their chests of like
Hmm.
different animals and dragons and things. And then when you see these paintings from the toys, it's like it looks almost like a ghostly apparition coming out of its armor. And I was
Right.
like, "Oh, that would be cool to do this story like this, but make it, kind of a funny ghost, like
Hmm.
it's like Aladdin." And I used to pitch it kind of when I had the seeds of the idea as it's like Aladdin meets like Poltergeist, like so
Okay.
you have like Aladdin and his genie, but then there's
Yeah,
also monsters around it. Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that. I mean, now, I mean, just as a refresher course, the idea is about a young man. I believe he's about 13. He
Yeah.
goes into an old castle basically and finds this mystical suit of armor, and he quickly finds out that he's joined by the previous wearer of the armor, Sir William, who I want to talk about in a little bit.
Yeah.
And story kind of goes from there. We've got a malevolent entity, I think, that he's going to be up against in a little bit. So the
Yep.
story is really intriguing, and I think it has a lot of potential to grow. I mean, when did you start actually going forward and making it into a comic book? Was it post 2018, I assume?
It was quite a ways because I just didn't know anything about comic book writing. Like I didn't get it. Like I always loved comics, but I was kind of intimidated by it. Like
Yeah,
it's so stupid. I'm in film. I've worked with Liam Neeson, I've worked with Katherine Heigl, I've worked with these big actors,
right.
but I was so intimidated by comics. Like I even meeting comic writers and artists, I was always like shy to go up to them. But
Yeah,
a movie director, I'll be like, "Hey, can I get your autograph?"
there you go.
um, I don't know what it was. There was some mystique about it, maybe.
Okay.
And so I think it was what year are we in now? So I guess it was 2022. Um, I was I had a pretty great deal writing movies for an animation studio, but
Mhm.
they went under. And
Okay.
I was like, what am I gonna do now? I keep these movies I keep writing don't get made. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the one. I gotta make Armored into a comic series. So the first thing I did was I started taking everyone. Jeff Johns is one of my favorite writers. So
Yeah,
I
join the
was
club. Mhm.
yeah. I was like, I have to like figure out what makes his book so good. Like, what is it about it? So I started taking all of his first issues and like examining them, like creating Excel documents. And
Really?
I'm a stickler for structure, so I'm
Okay.
always like examining what other writers do. And I
Yeah.
was studying some of what Tom King was doing on the Vision series, and I was
Hmm.
looking at their scripts. And what's funny is I was even using the way they write their scripts. I find a lot of different comic writers use a different format, but I like the way Tom King and Jeff Johns had formatted their books. So I was using their format. And then from there, I was like, well, I might as well jump into this.
Yeah.
And I just wrote the first issue, what I would like to have read as a first issue, and I sent it to a friend of mine who's an art director in animation.
Okay.
And he had done some Marvel work before. Like he did all the art for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the comic adaptation
Right.
of the ride. He had done some Venom. He had done a bunch of stuff. And I just said, can you just see if this even
Yeah.
comes close to a Marvel comic as far as a script, like scripts you've
This
read?
anything.
Yeah. And he had such positive feedback. He just said it's better than a lot of the Marvel scripts was his words. So I was like,
Mhm.
okay, should I do this? And he was like, yes, I want to be the artist on it. So I was like, okay, this is great.
Yeah.
But then I think he ended up getting a gig art directing a TV series here in Canada, so he couldn't do it. So I literally went into Google how to find artists for comic book.
Wow.
I didn't know what to do.
Okay.
And a Facebook page popped up, and it was connecting comic book writers with comic artists. And
Okay.
I recommend anyone who's starting out to go onto that page because it's a great way to meet writers, artists.
And
And
what is it called? Forgive me.
it's called Connecting Comic Book Writers with Artists.
Connecting comic book writers with artists. Okay.
Yeah. So the first thing I did is I ended up hiring an editor off of
Yeah.
that page. And that is what I recommend to anyone starting out is hire an editor because they'll see your comic differently. They'll tell you like what could be done to make it better, where to fix things, and that was invaluable. But on top of that, I happened to hire an editor. His name's Chris Stevens,
Mhm.
who he's an Eisner Award-winning writer as well. So he's
Okay.
written Eisner's. He knew a lot of artists, but he also knew what to look for in an artist. I didn't. Like I see people on that page, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. My eye is a bit more tuned now, but back then I didn't know what to look for. And he passed Ishmael Hernandez's artwork to me, the artist of Armored.
Hmm.
And he said, look at this guy. And I was like, oh, I really liked it, but I wasn't sure. I was like, are we sure this is the guy? I'm funding this thing. You have
Yeah.
to fund your own comics
Right.
when you're an indie creator. And so I just went for it. I loved his art. I felt like it had a timeless quality about it.
Okay.
So that's kind of how it came to be, Rob.
So getting back to the writing process, I mean,
Yeah.
your background is in film, as we
Yeah.
mentioned. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of differences in terms of writing for film versus writing for comics, but did you find any similarities between the two? I mean, is there an intersection there between the two?
Yeah. I always tell people, I think the intersection, for me at least, is you can still tell a three-act structure in a comic.
Hmm.
It's just, are you telling it over 12 issues? Are you telling it over 6 issues? Are you telling it over 4 issues? You can still tell like a movie structure within it, or you could use TV structure.
Right.
I'm a movie guy. I write movies, so I was like, well, I want to tell a three act story. And I originally wanted it to be 6 issues, but it's very expensive making comics, so I was like, how about
Right.
five? Five sounds
Okay.
good. And so, in many ways, we don't really hit Act Two until issue 2 of
Hmm.
Armored. Like, you know, uh, so that's the similarity, but the big difference I found was when writing, you have to think like a director. So
Okay.
I'm the director of the comic in a way that no one talks about. At least I didn't know beforehand.
Right.
I'm dictating what's on every panel.
Hmm.
Like I didn't know that, right? Like I didn't know I'd just be describing. I thought it was the old Marvel way before I got into it. It's like
Hmm.
this sort of stuff happens on this page. This should happen on this page, but
Right.
and then I give the dialogue, but it wasn't
Hmm.
that at all. It's like every panel I had to specify, is it a medium shot? Is it a close up? So you're thinking like a director.
Right.
In screenwriting for film, sometimes I'm just like he enters a room and it's kind of dark,
Yeah.
it's up to the director how he wants to do it.
Right.
I work with a director in film, like I've partnered with him, and so I let him kind of finish the story in that sense. Like I let him, once he shoots it or takes it into animation, how do you want the art direction to look? You figure it out. Here's the
Yeah.
story. So that's the difference and kind of the similarities. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I mean, you've done a good amount of work on movies for kids and young people.
Yeah,
I mean, Gnome Alone obviously is an example, but I mean, and Armored is about a young person. Like I said, I believe he's 13.
yeah.
And so did you mean for Armored to sort of be in that kid-friendly young adult space, or do you see it as more of an all ages series that just sort of happens to star a young person? Not, does it have like a young audience from an
It's
intention standpoint?
yeah, my so originally, I think when I, 2018, 2019, and I was kind of like toying with the idea of making it a screenplay, it was in my head a lot more of a kids movie,
Okay.
like not a lot of ghosts, things like that. There was a ghost element, but there wasn't like tons of monsters and stuff.
Right.
In my head, I had nothing on paper at that point. But
Hmm.
when I started writing it, I really felt like I wanted it to be like a Stranger Things or a Monster Squad,
Okay.
Gremlins. So like to me, that those are the movies I still watch to this day. Like I
Yeah.
think they're movies and TV shows that both adults and kids can watch. I have two young kids, so I'm always trying to find kind of spooky, scary things that I can watch with them.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, yeah. And so, what's funny is I started Armored before Zombie Town, but I had always even No Malone actually. Talking about No Malone, there's nods to horror movies in Gnome Alone, like the big one being the movie House from 1980s with William Catt. Like there was a point in the movie where we literally rip off a scene from House because we love the movies. It's more a homage
Yeah.
than anything, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, so I've always had that kind of in me. I love horror movies a
Hmm.
lot. Like I have a whole shelf behind the screen over here that's just filled with just horror movies that my kids can't watch. A
Hmm.
bunch they can watch.
Yeah.
But I've always liked that pairing of like kid horror movies, and they don't
Hmm.
make a lot of them. And so Stranger Things I like for that reason because like my son's a bit too young for it, but my daughter's kind of the perfect age.
Hmm.
And I wanted Armor to live in that genre.
Sort
Yeah.
of that intersection between kid friendly and horror. So it's sort of that
Exactly.
balancing act.
I
Okay.
really wanted adults to enjoy it too, though, right? Like,
Yeah,
don't get me wrong.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So let's talk about Sir William.
Okay.
He's the previous holder of the mystical armor that our main character finds.
Yes.
And we find that he's sort of his companion for the journey that he's on.
Yeah.
And what I liked about Sir William is that and I think I mentioned this in the video review I did, he has an old-timey way of speaking, but not to the point where you can't understand him. Like I've got the ADD, so sometimes when you get me reading something that's written in that style, it's like what did he say? What happened? But with Sir William, there's a lot of giveth and a lot of thy and a lot of
Yeah.
thou. So I mean, so did you intentionally write that character so that he was easier to understand? I mean, was that like a tangible choice that you made in terms of the way he speaks?
Yeah. Like let's just get this out there. I'm not a Neil Gaiman. I'm no Alan
Mhm.
Moore. I'm not a master of language. I never consider myself that. So I was like, well, this guy has to sound different. He's
Yeah.
from, the 13th century. What would he sound like? Or the 12th century? What would he sound like? And so, I was thinking about Thor. Sometimes I read Thor books and
Okay.
I'm just like, I cannot get through this. Sometimes it throws me off. Sometimes it's just enough. It's just enough.
Yeah.
And so um, I went back and forth with my editor a lot. And he's kind of helped me rein it in. At one point, I think he was really extreme with the like, it was a bit too much Shakespearean. Like I had a bit,
Yeah.
and he pulled me back. And honestly, every issue I'm pulling back. So now I'm writing issue 8, and we just want it to get less and less, where it's just he's becoming more acclimated to the new time period.
Okay.
And but we wanted to start it off. It was totally like a fake. We have no idea. No one sounds like this, but I didn't want people to get hung up on it. I just wanted to feel like he was from another time, and
Yeah.
I wanted him to be funny. So I didn't want people to be like, "What is he saying?" I want them to kind of laugh and giggle at his stupidity. Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you go. What's interesting, it's all so he's sort of going to lose it a little bit more as the issues go,
Just
like
pull it
you
back a bit. You'll
a little
see. You'll
bit.
see. By issue 6, you'll see just a little here and there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay.
It'll always be there, but it's something we've talked about. Like even with the publisher, Hank Canales is the publisher on the book, and even he's talked to like my editor, like, is this the direction we want to go? But I
Mhm.
think it kind of works. It's fake, right? Like there's nothing.
Yeah.
No one spoke like this, I imagine. So
Well, it's fake, but it's functional. That's the
it's
thing.
functional. That's
There
what we
you go.
needed. Yeah, yeah.
So getting back to Ishmael Hernandez, I mean, what does he bring to the book? Because I remember I said I looked at that first page and I immediately felt like it was something different. Like it looked different, it felt different. I mean, is he sort of the secret sauce that brings it all together? I mean, what does Ishmael Hernandez bring to the book in your mind?
Oh yeah, the look, the tone more than anything.
Hmm.
So like he just captures this darkness. Like the watercolors have a murkiness to them at points, and it
That's right.
feels
He
raw.
uses watercolors as
It
opposed to say
does.
traditional.
Yeah, so he pencils it and then inks it and then watercolors it and then will
Mhm.
enhance a few things here and there in digitally.
Right.
But it has this raw quality to it. I've often said it feels like in a way you could open up Armored and feel like, wait a minute, is this from the medieval times? Is this an old
Yeah.
scroll? Like
Uh-huh.
not always. Obviously, it's set in present
No.
day, but
It's got that vibe to it.
that vibe. And you'll see the characters kind of start learning about the castle in the first arc and like what's the deal with Sir William? Who is he? And he even paints old paintings within like these texts, these textbooks that have medieval drawings in them. And it's like, wow, you it's like your artwork, but in a book. It
Mhm.
feels kind of meta in a weird
Yeah.
way. So he ended up being the perfect artist for it. But now I would just want to say, like, early on it was a lot of like me detailing him to a point like, yeah, can you change the character to look like this? I envisioned it
Mhm.
more like this. And now he's starting to bring story ideas to me in the second arc.
Really.
Like I still write the script, but when he gets the script, he digests it and he says, well, what if the character's in a wheelchair? And here's
Mhm.
why I'm thinking he should be. And I'm like, wow, that's a really cool idea I didn't think of. And now I feel like he's become like now I can actually say we're like co-creators on this book, like moving. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
created all the designs, but it's now I feel like we've really hit our stride.
You're collaborators.
We're now collaborating on a different level, and I love it. I'm like really excited for the second arc, especially. Yeah.
So, I mean, I've heard you say 5 issues. I've heard you say 8 issues. I mean, does Armored have a lifespan in your mind? Do you know
So
how long you're gonna go?
I have an end for the series, but
Yeah.
we don't have like a specific like number because we
Okay.
don't know how it's going to do.
Right.
You could read issues 1 to 5, and that's a complete story. You don't need to read any more after that. It is a mini series 1 to 5, but
Hmm.
I am writing 6 to 10 as the next arc. It
Nice.
issue 5 lands. It ends on a big cliffhanger, but it's not a cliffhanger in the sense where it's like, well, I have to know what happens to that character. Is he going to die or live? It's not like that. It's,
Right.
oh, that's interesting. This looks like a new story they're about to
Like there
tell,
could be more.
and there is. And
Hmm.
so, you know, I could, if it really doesn't do well, you never know with indie comics. If it
Right.
doesn't do
Exactly.
well, I'll probably end it on 20 issues. I
Okay.
want to tell that story.
Yeah.
Regardless, I'm going to tell the story in 20 issues, but I have so many stories I want to tell within it that it could go to like 50 or 60.
Oh, I believe it. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's what I said. It feels like the world could go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of potential there to explore and do a lot of different things. Now, one thing I geeked out over that I didn't know about, I looked at the original Kickstarter page for the first issue,
Yeah.
and I saw that you had endorsement blurbs from not only R.L. Stine himself, but Dan Aykroyd himself.
Yes. Yeah.
And I lost it a little bit, lost it a little bit. Uh, so what's that like to get, something that's such a personal project for you endorsed by names like that? I mean,
Oh
I
my
imagine that
God.
must have been really rewarding.
Well, they're childhood heroes of mine, right? Like
Yeah,
I grew up on Ghostbusters. I was
join the
watching
club.
Ghostbusters since I was 3, and then R.L.
Yeah,
Stine. That first, I think the first one I ever got was "Don't Go in the Basement" or "Don't." I forget the, with the
yeah,
green hand.
yeah. I know that one.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate to work on to co-write Zombie Town, and
Mhm.
so I got to meet R.L. Stine and Dan Aykroyd because of that movie. But it had been a year since working with them, and I had finished like I had a printed copy of issue 1. I called this the R.L. Stine printout, by the way, because he asked for a hard copy to read it. I reached out to him and said, "Would you mind reading my comic? And if you like
Yeah,
it, like maybe just let me know if you could share a blurb with me." And
right.
I didn't hear from them for weeks, and I was like, "Oh God, they hate it." I was stressed. Clover was asking, "Can you get some blurbs from people?" I was like, I don't know them,
Right.
right? I know them, but barely."
Yeah.
And so they responded so well. Like, that was the thing R.L. Stine said about Ishmael's artwork, was that it really lends to the tone of the book. He really and Dan Aykroyd, like I was flabbergasted when he said he liked it and he gave me that blurb. I was like, what? I was like, pinch me. This feels surreal. It still feels surreal, Rob. Like I feel like,
Yeah.
is this real? Yeah.
You know what? If I got a blurb from Dan Aykroyd about anything, everybody could kiss my ass. That's just
Yeah.
that's where I would be if I were in your shoes, my man. So, okay, we're going into issue 2. Well,
Mhm.
I've read issue 1. Issue 1 comes out April 24th.
Yep.
And so what do you got coming down the pipe as far as Armored's concerned? What can people expect from the series going forward?
Okay. Oh, it's a tough one without giving anything
I was
away.
gonna say,
I
what
will
what
say
what can you tell us?
we set up a lot of mysteries in the first issue.
Okay.
But I will say almost all of them are resolved by the end of issue 5.
Okay.
There's one big one that probably won't be resolved for numerous like a few arcs, but
Mm-hmm.
all of the main ones, who the monster is in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of who's behind the monster, all of that gets resolved. I will say, I just found out yesterday they are going to be pre-launching a Kickstarter for issues 3, 4, and 5,
Okay.
just for anyone that wants to get the issues early and to be able to get the covers they want. So when we go to direct market, we really only do one cover and then like a 1/5 variant.
Right.
This way, it allows anyone to get whatever cover they want, easily accessible to anybody. And it helps gauge the interest
Yeah.
for Clover because it's hard with these indie books. Like,
Right.
don't know how many they need to print
Yeah.
beforehand, and
It's kind of
uh,
guesswork sometimes.
it is, and so it really helped doing the first one, I think, for them. Although I think sales were a bit higher than we expected for the first issue through the direct market, which helped. But
I say
we
that's never
they
a bad thing.
yeah, they want to do it again for 3, 4, and 5. So look out for that. That'll be coming sometime in March. The
Sometime in
pre-launch,
March.
the pre-launch. Yeah,
Okay. Excellent. So in terms of what's to come, we can say intrigue and
intrigue, mystery.
mystery and
Yes,
okay.
more
All right.
monsters, more ghosts.
There, of
Maybe
course,
some
naturally.
possessions, and zombies,
Oh my
possibly.
gosh.
There's a whole bunch of stuff, yeah, and armor to
That's
look out for.
that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. Is there anything else you would like to add, Mr. Schwartz? Anything else you want to say about Armored?
Nothing. I just hope people get a chance to read it. I just want people to read it at this point, even if it's digitally. Check it out. Like, uh, I just want people to have fun with it. Then when I'd been reading so many comics, and I have so many comics on my pull list, and there's some days where I'm like, not a lot happened in that issue. I wish there was
Yeah,
just a bit more story because it's
right.
just like a fight or whatever. So I just wanted everyone to, you're paying $5. I want people to
Yeah,
come away and feel like that was worth the $5. I didn't waste it. I feel like I got some story. I'm kind of interested in the next issue. I hope that's what people get from Armored when they read it.
that's the best feeling when you feel like
Yeah,
you didn't waste your money when you
exactly.
put it down.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? Michael?
Well,
We're on social media, anywhere.
yeah, probably the best place is Instagram at Mike Schwartz Writes or on Threads at Mike Schwartz Writes. I'm probably on there the most. You can also find me on Twitter or X at the Mike Schwartz.
The Mike
But
Schwartz.
yeah, that's the best place. Or you can, check out the CloverPress Instagram, Twitter accounts. You'll be seeing news about Armored on there all the time. So yeah. And the
Excellent.
latest
Michael,
issue two is in the latest previews. So if you are at your
I
comic
just
shop,
saw that you posted
yeah.
about that.
So yeah, pre-order issue, and you can still pre-order issue one through previews, I believe. I noticed that they had at the bottom of the ad, it's still available. So
Oh, it is. Okay.
yeah. So I think you can still place a few more. So until they run out, really.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. And again, Armored #1, it shops April 24th. And then look for issue 2 on June 26th. And you can order issue 1 through previews right now, apparently.
Yeah, still. Yeah. Thank you so much,
Excellent.
Rob. Very nice
Thank you,
meeting you.
sir.
Yeah.